So we're going to have, as Victor said, about 20 minutes just talking about reply speeches. So I'm going to go through like the basics of them, how they work, how to like choose what to put into one of them, because it's slightly different to how you make any other speech in a debate. And we'll also cover some tactics about them, and also how to adjudicate them. If you're doing the ADGE test next Saturday, the ADGE test debate is going to have replies in them, so you're going to need to know how to mark them and like judge them and justify your decision based on them. So that'll be the last thing we cover. So the basics about a reply speech. It's effectively a half speech. So the timing is half of what it would be for a normal speech. So a normal speech, 6 to 8 minutes. Reply speech is 3 to 4 minutes, and they happen at the very end of the debate. So you'll have like first, second, third, then the replies happen. But the replies happen in the reverse order. So the negative team reply comes straight after the third negative speech, and then the debate finishes with an affirmative team's reply. The reply can only be delivered by either your first speaker or your second speaker, so you can't like speak third and also do the reply, because that'd be really boring listening to the same person for 12 minutes straight. And basically what it is that it's a summary of the debate and why your team won that debate. So you're not going to argue anything, you're not going to bring in new material or rebut anything. You're going to look back at the debate that happened, you're going to discuss that debate in 3 to 4 minutes, what the key issues were in that debate, and you're going to just basically tell everyone why at the end of that your team won. And so they're very reflective. We'll talk about past tense a bit later on, but you talk about in the past tense. So you'll use phrases like, the affirmative team brought you this analysis about like women's rights, but the problem with that was whatever, so on and so forth. So you're talking all in the past tense, and you want to sound as objective as possible. So you're not being passionate, you're not being subjective. It's just a pure analysis of the debate that's gone before you. So what's the aim of them? They're not like anything else that you've done so far in debating. Basically, like the big problem a lot of people have with replies is this second point, that they're about why your side won the debate, not why your side was right. So just to explain the difference between those, in a debate, you're showing why your side is right. If it's a debate about banning pornography, you've got 3 speakers in a row showing why your side is right, that pornography is a bad thing. This is more objective, not looking at like arguments and like why women's rights are a good thing. It's looking at why you won those arguments and why those arguments are crucial to the debate. So does everyone see the subtle difference between those? So you're not arguing a side, you're arguing about a debate. And I think that the easiest way to explain that is it's like giving a biased adjudication. So imagine that by some strange, weird rule in Australs, they allow the first or second speaker from the side to also be on the adjudication panel. So you obviously want your side to win, so you're going to explain, therefore, very biasedly why you won that debate. So imagine you're adjudicating a debate, you've got 3 to 4 minutes to explain that in before the teams get really pissed off with you, so you need to sit there and explain to them in 3 to 4 minutes why you think that side won the debate. So it's just use those sorts of things that you use in an adjudication. So you're not going to argue about issues, you're not going to add new material or like rebut speakers in an adjudication, you're simply going to talk about issues, so think of them like that. So, the structure of a reply speech is really, really important, because you don't have 8 minutes to piss fart around and do whatever you want. You've got 3 or 4 minutes, and it's like the last thing that happens in the debate. And sometimes debates can actually be won on these replies, so structure is really important so that you get the most out of these 3 to 4 minutes. So basic things I'm going to say about this. First of all, have a very minimal intro. So like if you're speaking third speaker, you'll often have like a minute to a minute and a half setting up your speech, like identifying the big clashes in the debate and like mocking the other side. You don't have time to do that in a reply speech. A reply intro is basically just listing what those themes are going to be and then getting stuck into them. It shouldn't take more than about 20 to 30 seconds. And throughout your reply, you need to make sure that you're not giving too much depth to arguments, because you're not re-explaining them. You're not like going, like, we gave you these 8 levels of analysis to this. All that you're doing is that you're stating that those arguments existed. You might want to say things like, and we gave you 4 substantive reasons about why that happened, and they didn't deal with any of these, but you don't want to list through them. You don't need to re-explain arguments, because you physically just can't do that in 4 minutes. So don't bother doing that. And just like anything else as far as structure goes, like there's no like set rule on how to do these as far as structure goes. Just like there's no set rule on exactly how you should do a first speaker or a third speaker speech. But there are ways that are slightly less good than other ways. But the basic advice that I'll give you is that just like a third speaker has themes, you want to have like themes or questions or points of clash or whatever you want to call them. But unlike a third speaker, you will only ever have time to answer 2 of these questions. You don't have time to do 3 questions. So you're looking at doing about 30-second intro, about a minute and a half for each of these big clashes, and we'll talk about how you pick those questions in a second, and then probably about 20 to 30 seconds just to sum it up and make it all into a nice, neat little parcel of 4 minutes to make you win the debate. And the last thing I'll say about structure is that when you're picking these themes, you're not just going to recycle what your third speaker said, because a lot of people sort of just fall back on like, well, our third speaker had 2 really important questions and then one that was like the random side issues that the second negative speaker spoke about, so I'll drop that and I'll take the first 2 and that's going to be my reply. That makes you look bad, especially, and we'll talk about this later, if you're doing the negative team's reply, because you're coming straight after them. And basically what it makes it look like is that your team has a very limited scope of the debate. You want to, even if they are very similar themes to what your third speaker talked about, you want to reword them and you want to change them slightly because you want to show that you have, at the reply speech, a different opinion of the debate. You have a very broad, overarching idea of everything that happened in the debate, encompassing everything that happened in the debate, rather than make it look exactly like the only idea you have of the debate is exactly what your third speaker said. So, what do we talk about in a reply speech? You can't, as I said already, talk about everything that happened in the debate. Like, it's just impossible to go through every single argument and all the analysis that came. But ideally what you're trying to do is give a holistic view of everything that has happened in the debate and try and like either do one of 2 things. Either you're going to use this reply to win back lost issues. So you might sit there after your third speaker's spoken and realise that the most important point in the debate, your side is currently losing. So you want to use your reply to try and win that stuff back or to make it less important in the debate. So you can sit there and like effectively concede some things that the other side might have gotten away with, but be very careful doing that. But try and show that they just weren't as important, or use it to cut that sort of stuff out of the debate. So just re-emphasise some of the material that your side did have and try and make it look like the material that you brought did win that, even if it wasn't winning that stuff. Or you can use it to increase the importance of other issues. So if you've clearly smacked the other side on something like feminism or like the role of government or something like that, then a reply speech is a really good time to first of all show that you won that issue, so explain like why your side won that issue, what you brought, why the other side didn't do enough to beat you. And also, an important thing is something that a lot of people forget about replies because they're sort of unique to replies compared to a like third speech, is that you need to show why these issues were also important. So why does winning feminism win you the debate about banning pornography? So make sure that you show not just that you won them, but that winning that issue therefore won you the debate. And the other thing to look at is look for clear fails on your opposition side. So if your opposition has contradicted themselves, if they've like decided at third neg that they're going to change their entire model and like have an entire case shift, the reply sheet is a good time to point that sort of stuff out. So just sit there and obviously in a totally like calm and adjudicatory sort of way, just explain that like their case had to change at this point because they couldn't deal with the fact that we had already brought you all this analysis about X, Y, and Z. So the only way they could do anything was to shift their case, and that was problematic for the negative team in this debate. Or you can use it to like just highlight lack of responses or missing steps of analysis and those sorts of things. So you guys have all done, hopefully, I know some people would have missed it, but look at it on the website, the adjudication session. So think of it, as I said, just like you're an adjudicator. So if you're an adjudicator, you'd pick out contradictions and case shifts, you'd pick up things like lacks of responses and all those sorts of things, and you'd have to pick big issues in the debate, explain who won them and why those issues were important. So all these things come back to that biased adjudication. Probably when it comes, I'm not sure if this is on the next slide or not, so I'll just talk about it now and then maybe talk about it again in a second. I think that the best way that I've ever been shown to do replies comes from when you're picking these 2 themes, try and pick one that you think that you are losing. So pick one that the negative, well, sorry, not negative, because you might be the negative thing, so the other side you think has gotten away with, and use that minute and a half to just chip away at that and try and win back some ground on that. And make another one that you think you're clearly winning, so that you can, and I'll put that one first obviously as well, because you want to start off with like, here's why we won the most important issue and all that sort of stuff. So have one where you've clearly won, show why you won it, show why that's important, and then show one about what you think the other side was winning, chip away at that as much as you can without obviously rebutting or bringing in new material, and try and downplay the importance of it if you honestly just can't beat it when you're reusing this analysis from the debate. Okay, the next slide wasn't about that. Fantastic. Cool. So the next thing, and this is really, really important about replies, is that the manner of a reply speech is very, very different to any other speech that you're giving. Because the debate's over now, so you're not like trying to be this hugely charismatic, like awesome, like smackdown speaker anymore. Or like the way you're trying to do this, as I said time and time again, is from the point of view of a biased adjudicator. So no adjudicator is going to get up there and like yell and scream at the debaters and be like, you lost for these 8 reasons, like those sorts of things. Just be really calm and really reflective on the debate. So you're going to have a much calmer manner, especially compared to your average third speaker who you're coming straight after. The debate is going to have a massive shift in manner. So it's going to be really calm. You're going to use like very few gestures and those sorts of things, and it's going to be very reflective, and it's going to be in the past tense. And manner in replies also is to do, as I said, they're using past tense, is also to do with the language that you use. So you don't want to be using aggressive language in these. You don't want to say things about like, you don't want to just say things like, here's why we clearly won this debate, or things like that. Like, you don't want to sound like a jerk, you don't want to sound aggressive, you want to sound just totally reasonable, totally objective. Again, just like an adjudicator would. So, some strategy stuff. The biggest and most important difference that reply speeches add to a debate is what we call the neg block. Because as I said, the neg reply comes directly after the third negative speech. So that means that regardless of which side you're on, this is going to change your strategy slightly, because the negative team now has 12 uninterrupted minutes of debating for them. So negative teams need to use this time carefully. Third negs can now drop summaries pretty much entirely. Like, obviously there'll be some summary like interwoven into your themes, because like that's how debates work. But don't sit there at the end and be like, we brought you these arguments, blah, 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 30-second summary, because that's a waste of time, because you're about to have a 4-minute summary of everything that's happened. So just use as much of that 8 minutes as possible to smack down, to get all the material out that your reply speaker is going to need to use. Because they can't rebut, because they can't offer new material, you need to get all of these responses out so that they can sit there and say, like, we told you at third negative that blah, 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 therefore we win. Except you're not going to say therefore we win, because that's bad. And also, as I said there, so you need to smash the key issues, you need to push back on things that you think you're losing, just to get as much ground as possible to give that 4 minutes the most power that can potentially have. Affirmative teams, you also need to prepare for the fact that you're about to have 12 uninterrupted minutes of being smacked around. So, third avs now really need to focus on their summary. And I'm not talking like a blow by blow, like our first speaker, Sam, told you these 3 things, and our second speaker, Nicole, told you these 2 things. Like, it needs to be a very clear, yeah, you're my team. It needs to be very clear, I'd say about 30 seconds, just to effectively summarize the entire debate and make it as positive for your team as possible. So make sure you're identifying at that point really key issues of clash. If you know what your reply speaker's idea is going to be, this could be a good time to introduce those very quickly there. Like, this debate's fallen down to 2 things, here's what they were, and we've clearly won on both of them. Or obviously just revert back to your themes and be like, we've brought you 3 key issues, here's why we won them all. You just need to make sure that at the end of that 30 seconds of summary, that the debate is painted as favourably for your side as possible, so that it can stand up to this neg block. And the second thing about affirmative teams is your reply speaker is always going to have the tendency, given that there's just been 12 minutes, to try and respond to stuff that's happened in that neg block. Remember, you can't rebut the third neg speaker, you can't add new material, and you shouldn't be responding to reply at all. So their reply, like, you're not going to sit there and say, like, they told you in the reply that this, like, that's just not on. You can only talk about the 6 of standard speakers. But you need to therefore be really cautious about how they've used that block tactically. So if they have pushed back on a key issue that you were winning, but now there's a bit of like doubt on that, you probably want to get in there and smash that back and really focus on it and focus why they didn't do enough. So although you can't say like their third neg said this and here's why they're wrong, you can still sit there and say like they told you this, but that wasn't enough to overwhelm the analysis that we gave you through all these 3 speeches. Here's why that analysis still trumps despite anything they wanted to do. Here's why we win, so on and so forth. So the neg block is the most important tactic thing that's going to happen for you guys in debates that have replies. Okay, quick just summary of things not to do. So, never say, we won because, like, you just look like a jerk. Never rebut, never bring in new material, don't get uppity. Make sure you're being calm, collected, talking in the past tense, and like not rebutting or being uppity in general. Don't repeat your third speaker. Like obviously you're going to refer to them because they were a part of this debate that happened, so like they're still relevant. But by that I mean like don't just sit there and say like the same themes as them or two of their three themes. Don't just repeat the summary of the debate that they gave. Like you need to still be a new speaker in this debate. And a lot of people sort of like think replies are useless, and we'll deal with this in a second, because the problem is that people don't use them properly, because people do use them to rebut or to get uppity or just to repeat people, which makes them redundant. If you do them properly, they're not redundant. They're really important, they're really good. And the last thing also is there's a tendency of a lot of people just to like jump back and forth, like they said this, but we said this, but we said this, and they said this, and then we said this, and then we gave you this response, and therefore we win this argument. Like, don't, as much as possible, avoid that. Like, sometimes you're going to have to do it because you're going to be comparing and contrasting issues. So you are going to have, like, we gave you this, they gave you this. But as much as possible, just try and group all of your side stuff in, like, just one phrase. So, like, we brought you 3 levels of analysis on this, maybe across, like, all 3 of your speakers that brought this. We told you these 3 things, they had these 3 things, and then analyse them after you've given them. Don't compare and contrast by jumping through them because it gets messy, and it will make you rebut things. Like, you'll just accidentally sit there and reply to something or bring in new material. Yes?
I know some speakers like to speak in the third person. What do you think about that?
Yes. So some people, like, say I'm the reply speaker for the affirmative team, some people won't say, like, we brought you this analysis. Some people will say, the affirmative team from the start of this debate brought you this, and talk about their team as the affirmative team rather than our team. This can often be a really effective tactic to stop you from bringing in new material or rebutting or anything like that, because it just makes you sound more objective. For some people, they just don't feel right doing it. So you can still say, like, we told you this, we didn't say that. But I'd say the main thing is just to be consistent. So if you're going to talk about yourself as we, do it for the entire reply speech. If you're talking about the affirmative team and the negative team, then do it for the entire reply speech. But neither is right or wrong. Thank you for your question, Sam. Okay. Last thing that we're going to cover is adjudicating these. So, as I said at the start, reply speeches are a half speech. They get half the amount of time that any other speech does, so they also get half the amount of points. So your average speech is marked out of 100, a reply speech is marked out of 50 points. Your average speech for a normal substandard speech is a 75 speaker score. Your average reply speech is 37.5. So the first thing you'll notice is that there's 0.5s on my wonderful little scoring chart. Like, I've just drawn a few random examples out there. In reply speeches, you can give half points. So if I give the most average reply that there is, do nothing wrong, do nothing particularly awesome, I should get a score of 37.5. You can't give a normal speaker like 75.5 or anything like that. So this is the first thing that makes these unique. So scoring range for them, therefore, is half of the scoring range for the tournament. So if you've got a tournament that's scored between 70 and 80, then your reply speakers are all going to be marked between 35 and 40. So basically, just like the easiest way to do this is just to sit there and think about it as though like you're marking it like a normal speech. So, if they'd done that normally, like that was brilliant, that was an 80, and then just go and halve that, work out what it is, and do that, rather than trying to sit there and think like, was this a 36 or a 36.5? Mark as a normal one and then divide by 2, and it's much simpler. Other things about adjudicating them. Don't listen to anyone that says that a reply speech can't win the debate. If they couldn't win the debate, they wouldn't be in Austral's tournament, because like they'd be totally redundant and a waste of 8 minutes of time. They can win debates, that's why they're there, if they're used effectively, especially really close debates. There were debates that we did last year at Australs where after all 6 substandard speakers were gone, the scores were totally level and debates were decided by like 0.5 points in the reply speech. So don't listen to anyone that says that they can't win them. You can award a debate purely on the reply. It doesn't happen often because quite often you don't get a debate that was a tie after the 6 substandard speeches, but sometimes you do, or sometimes you'll get one that was...
Can you still like close that?
Yeah, so sometimes it'll just close a margin, but also there have been times where people are losing a debate after the 6 substandard speeches are over, but they're losing it by a fairly small margin, and then they give a reply speech that is so much better than the other sides that they can actually push back and win it. Obviously, like, this is going to be affected by the issues that were in the debate, so they can't obviously like sit there and bring out a wonderful new substandard case. So if they do get smashed in the real debate, the chance of them winning it back in the reply is very, very minimal, because they have to work with what was given to them. But in a debate that you might have been thinking about at the end of the substantive speeches, yeah, the negative team's ahead, so I don't think the affirmative team's really proven this. But then they come out at the affirmative reply and show that, well, actually, yes, we did prove that. Here's how we showed this across the line. Here's how the other side didn't respond to it. Anything like that can change that perception of those views. So you need to give them credit for those sorts of things. And it can actually sway the debate, even if a team was losing or if the debate was deadlocked. And the other thing to think about when you're adjudicating them is basically, did they cover the broad issues and explain why their team was going to win this debate? So did they pick the right things? Was there, that doesn't mean did they pick the same themes that you did. It means, was the two themes that they picked a fair overview of this debate? So did they explain the debate that actually happened properly? Did they do it properly? So did they make sure they didn't rebut? Did they make sure they didn't bring new material? Did they just reflect on the debate that happened in a fair way and a biased enough way to explain why they won those issues and why those issues were important? So that's basically how you adjudicate them. So, as we said, that was going to be a very short session. It's already over. Win. So, are there any questions about replies? Okay, yep.
Do you have to pre-choose who is going to be the
No.
reply speaker?
So, as I said, your reply has to be either your first or second speaker, but you could decide during the third negative speaker that the first neg is going to do the neg reply straight after them. The thing about debating is that you're never actually locked in going into a debate into your speaker positions. You're only locked in under Australs and Easters and Worlds rules the minute one of your speakers gets up to speak. Obviously after that, they can't speak again. So you could put someone up as your first affirmative and not know who's going to be your second affirmative and third affirmative. Likewise, it's dodgy and it's probably problematic if you don't know who's delivering the substantive speech. But you can do it, and likewise you can do it with replies. Is there a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask, not what's the wrong word, but what's the punishment if they do kind of manipulate the material or lie at something instead? Not punishment, but what kind of
It's the same.
reduction in
Yeah.
scoring for it?
That's totally up to you on that sort of stuff. There's no, just like normal debating. If I'm a third speaker that brings in new material, there's no set punishment for me. You lose 1 point per piece of new material you bring in.
But it's really important?
Well, it depends on how much it affected that speech. So if their entire reply speech was dependent on one bit of information that was new material that really wasn't in the debate, and they just kept on coming back to it and saying, we told you this, and they just didn't, that's obviously going to affect them a lot. If it's just something they say in passing, we gave you 4 reasons, they were A, B, C, and D, and C didn't really exist, then that's probably not as problematic, especially if the other 3 were substantive. So it's just up to you about how much that really affected their credibility in it. And that's the other thing as a reply speaker, is that yes, sometimes you'll get away with saying you said shit that you didn't say, but if you don't, first of all, it's going to harm you because you will be penalised for it. But secondly, it just harms you entirely, just harms your credibility, and that's another thing to think about as an adjudicator, is if they were clearly lying, that's going to harm their credibility as well and harm the speech as a whole. Karma.
I know in a few debates I've seen and done, there's a tendency for reply speakers to get up there and call people on that and say snarky things like, what we heard really late in the debate was this, what we heard was that. How much credence would you give to that kind of method of calling them on it, and how much would you
That's-
just avoid?
I wouldn't do it if they did it in their reply, ignore their reply entirely. If they came up with a response in their reply, you just have to trust your adjudicator that they picked up that was new material. You can't sit there and say their reply speaker brought you this, because you're analysing 6 speeches, not 7.
Yeah.
If they did do something like new material at the neg though, you can use those sort of subtle things. So you can sit there and be we gave you all of this, but it wasn't until very late in the debate that they told you this. You obviously then can't rebut their third negative speaker and what they did say, but you can sit there and say that was too late, not that late, but we only got a response very late, and you need to show that it was an insufficient response. Because remember, third negs are actually allowed to rebut things late in the debate. That's their job to do. So you just need to show why leaving it that late was harmful, rather than just say they said it late. Yeah, exactly. Sterling.
Yeah, 2 things. First of all, so do you usually decide for the debate who's going to be the reply speaker? And secondly, if a reply speaker in the debate, should they sort of not worry about trying to pass on rebuttal to their teammates and just focus on the
Well, no, because you, I'll deal with the second part first.
Yeah.
You as a reply speaker are dependent on them rebutting things, because you can't rebut yourself. So if you think of a response and you want to work that into your speech, you need it to come out earlier. So it's actually more crucial for a reply speaker more than anyone else to sit there and talk to them, especially for a negative team. You need to be sitting there as a reply speaker as early as possible with your third speaker, working out how you're going to use that block effectively. So you need to be sitting there saying, like, make sure that you're rebutting this, make sure that this is this. Like, when I did replies, because I did replies for my Australs team last year, me and Colette would sit there and work out our 5 themes as a group and, like, work from there rather than, like, just working that independently, because you just can't do it like that way. You need to be communicating, because you can't sit there and write the last bit of the neg reply when you hear your third speaker say it. You need to know what they're saying. The first bit about deciding beforehand, most teams just have a set reply speaker in them, like especially going into Australs. However, like pre-Adam, you guys, like when you're doing Adam, you guys who aren't in Australs teams may like want to all try them out yourselves, so you mix it around. You don't have to decide beforehand, but it's probably tactical, just because like right from the start of the debate, you want to be like thinking about what's going to make up your reply. Like you can't write these things just in the last 4 minutes of the like third neg speech. Like even if you're doing it from second speaker, you want to be sitting there during the first speeches when you're writing your rebuttal, also writing some of the stuff that you're going to be putting in your reply as well. So you need to, it's better to think about it earlier. Come on. Adam is a pre-Australs tournament that's open to everyone. It's 3-on-3 with replies, so it's in Austral style. It's the weekend directly before Australs, so it's the last weekend of June, I think.
The 25th to the 27th of June.
There you go, and you should all definitely do it.
Yeah.
How can I find out more information?
I'm not the externals officer.
Go to mudsonline.net.
Yeah, mudsonline.net. There'll be stuff on Mad's website about it soon as well. This is, like, although tonight you're going to get to try out replies, Adam is probably the most effective place to do it, just because you get to do, like, I can't remember, I think it's 6 rounds of, like, debates with them in them. Tonight you're going to get to do 1, and I don't know how many practice debates from here on people are actually going to use replies in. So, like, it's probably more, like, if you want to practice these, and I recommend you do, because if you can do reply speeches, you immediately become a massive commodity as far as Australs teams go. So, like, make yourself a commodity, sell yourself out, learn how to do a reply. Learn it at Adam. Be a sell out, it's fun. Any more questions? No. Okay, we'll start.